好，大家安安，大家安安，大家好。这样子，声音跟画面是 OK 的吗？我来看看，我自己也来看看。好像是 OK 的。如果有什么问题，欢迎随时提出。那我先来跟大家打个招呼，熊安安，欢迎你来变大光之卷。对，格列佛游记最有名的桥段是，他进到一个小人国，所以他就相对而言成了一个超大巨人。不过我们今天没有要念那一段。熟人安安，欢迎，谢谢熟人抖内的500元，让我买周边，也太好了吧！谢谢你。之后可以来点歌，对。陆可安安，欢迎，小饼干安安，欢迎，高菜安安，欢迎你们。今天大家过得如何啊？我今天也是过得有点消沉，不过就是请了半天假，哪要整天有工作，然后请了半天假，对，就是有用，不可耻，而且有用。有什么状况就赶快请假，赶快说明状况，赶快说什么时候可能可以补，或者要怎么补偿，这样子就是不可耻，而且有用。休息一下，后来晚上去买了想看的漫画，那翻开看了其中一册就回血了。现在还是处于一个有点累的状态，但是没那么糟了。就还是照原定计划开台。李安安，欢迎你来！我们今天要读的是《格列佛游记》，我还在想什么时候，上次有把帧数调到60，但是感觉有一点钝还是我要调回30？对啊，感觉60莫名的很钝，我调回30好了。的 FPS， 明天是礼拜天，所以明天应该我猜蛮多人会是休息的，休息很好，对，应该要休息。如果是得要上课的话，就是辛苦了；得要上班上课的话呢，就是辛苦大家。FPS 在哪里跳啊？我真的是猜到有神我真的超菜。上次明明也是我自己找到要在哪里跳 FPS， 为什么现在就又不会跳了 ？BTS 上面的，我真的是猜到有神。哎呀，真是的，我看一下，可是我眼睛脱窗啊，跟批曼哥回那个时候才调到那个 FPS 调到60，然后在这吗？在这，好，赞，这样好了。对，那个时候因为我基本上只开了我的 VTS， 然后连线到他那里，然后那个 OBS 是他开的，后台是他开的，对。但是现在的话，我自己开台的话，是我用笔电。要开就是所有东西，所以我觉得好像开60 bps 有点钝，蛮钝的，开回30。好，丽安安、吴安安，欢迎你们来。今天我想念《格列佛游记》。《格列佛游记》其实是一本超级无敌长的书，大家最耳熟能详的应该是小时候在童书或者在那种绘本上面会看到。前面熊说的，就是格列佛仿佛是一个巨人。被一大堆小人围着，然后拿绳子绑起来拖着走，那样子的情景，那个场景或者情节是在第1部。伦安安，欢迎！《格列佛游记》总共有4部，对，然后因为它真的太长了，所以我就挑我自己有读过1、2、4部，3我就挑过没有读，不知道为什么，我就挑我最喜欢的第4部来看。大家如果我念朗读台，基本上。为了哄睡，跟为了我要练英文，跟为了避免版权问题，所以我通常都是念英文版的，就是确认版权是可以念的英文版，因为翻译也是有版权的。 对，所以我是念英文原文。不过如果对故事有兴趣的话呢，今天我有在资讯里面打一个推荐的译本，是推荐一个中研院的老师叫单德兴老师，他的译本。对，中文在资讯里面我说中文版推荐单德兴老师的译本，这个再资讯栏一遍。不过既然现在提到，我也就贴到聊天室里面，还有一个专访这样。对，这是有2个连接，这样点不开对不对？好像一次太多，等等，一次放2个连接是不行的，一则讯息是不能放2个连接的。我之前好像犯过一样的错，所以如果对中文版有兴趣的话，可以去看一下单德兴老师的译本，是联经出版的。然后他也有一篇蛮短的专访，中研院的专访，中研院言之有物的专访，短短的，真的很短，一下就能看完。所以如果对格列佛游记故事有兴趣的话，欢迎去看看。那今天刚好是就是我要念的是第4部嘛，它总共有4部。然后我刚刚讲最有名的那一部是格列佛跑到小人国去，那他就变成一个巨人嘛。他就是我记得那一章我最有印象的是那个小人国那里有了火灾，然后他撒泡尿就解决了，就灭火了，但感觉好臭哦。对，那在第2章的话呢，他反而进到一个大人国，所以他变成一个小小的人被那样对待。他自己身体没有变大变小，是他进入了一个小人国，身体就相对变得很巨。那进入大人国或巨人国，那他就相对变得很小。这样子，所以跟上一次我们念的《爱丽丝梦游仙境》不太一样。《爱丽丝梦游仙境》是爱丽丝本人是有放大缩小的这样子，然后她是进入动物的王国，所以以这个状况来讲，都是英国或爱尔兰文学，然后都是进入有点像异国，一个完全不同的地方。那从他们进入异国的那些反应跟行动表现呢，可以反映出他们自己是如何看待世界的这些角色。爱丽丝还是格列佛是怎么看待世界的？这样，好啊。奥特曼被拖走，是有类似的情节吗？我没有看奥特曼，或是奥特曼是不是就是咸蛋超人啊？是吗？我没有看过，是有类似的情节吗？对，那今天要念的那个第4章呢，如同我刚刚，他第一章是去小人国，第2章去大人国，第3章他去了很多地方。就第3章他就说去到某地以及某地的航行，这样。他的每一步，应该说每一步，他每一步都是这样子的开头。第1步是去到小人国的航行或是旅程，第2步是去到大人国，第3步是他就列了一长串地名，然后其中在宫崎骏天空之城，那天空之城不是叫拉普达吗？拉普达这个词呢，它原本也是从格列佛游记出来的，就第3部他去了一大串地方里面，其中有个地方叫拉普达，然后比较有趣的是，他第3部去的那一串地名里面还有一个是日本 Japan， 他就说拉普达 blah 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 and Japan， 所以可能对那个时候格列佛游记是17世纪的英国文学，说不定对那个时候的人来讲，他们对东洋的想象就是一个仿佛是虚拟国度一样的地方。对，确实是这样没有错，好像16还17世纪。有一个欧洲人，忘记是哪一国人了，他谎称他有来过福尔摩沙，就是台湾这样，然后他就写了一个虚构的福尔摩沙的人物地理志，就是旅游文学这样，所以显示出第一个是他们那个时候的欧洲，17、18世纪的欧洲英国很流行这种旅游文学。那不过那个旅游并不是一个单纯的旅游，通常是以自身观点去看世界。那通常有那个时候而言有蛮多偏见的，像是那个到底17还是18世纪号称来过福尔摩沙那个人呢，他被查出他其实一辈子根本就没有来过，他就是虚构一个地方。那本书还超级畅销，对，就很有趣。除了他们是怎么去想你到了一个虚构的世界，他们怎么虚构那个世界之外呢，还有他们如何把一个遥远的东方国家看作虚构世界。那其中可能也有凸显出一些西方人或白人优越情节 那还蛮有趣的。要喊巴鲁斯，对，天空之城嘛，拉普达的巴鲁斯，对，所以拉普达这个词最开始就是在《格列佛游记》里面出现的。然后还有已经比较少人在用的雅虎奇摩浏览器，大家知道吧？雅虎这个词也是从《格列佛游记》出来的哦。它是《格列佛游记》我们今天要念的第4部。第4部是这个它会怎么翻啊？我就叫它马国好了，就是马就是 horse 那个马的国度，我不是在骂脏话，就是真的是马，一群马的国度这样子。第4章它是去马国这样，然后雅虎就是出自于关于马国描述里面的一个词，雅虎这个词，所以还蛮酷的。如果大家有兴趣的话，可以看我放在资讯栏或刚刚聊天室的那一篇专访，短短的，它就有讲到这些。那其中雅虎这个词的话，我们今天念的部分是会念到的。好，然后我想一想，所以就照惯例，我应该会念个这一部第4部，就是他去马国，总共有12章，我今天应该会念3章，就差不多7000字，然后3章全部念完之后，会跟大家讲一下刚刚的故事发生什么事，大概是这样子的流程。那如果途中听英文听到睡着，也蛮好的。就是可以充当哄睡。如果对英文觉得比较不擅长的话，你可以听他睡觉。好，那我就开始喽。Part 4: A Voyage to the Country of the Winnims. Chapter 1. The author sets out as captain of a ship. His men conspire against him, confined him a long time to his cabin, and set him on shore in an unknown land. He travels up into the country. The Yahoos, a strange sort of animal, described. The author meets 2 Winnims. I continued at home with my wife and children about 5 months in a very happy condition, if I could have learned the lesson of knowing when I was well. I left my poor wife big with child and accepted an advantageous offer made me to be captain of the Adventurer, a stout merchantman of 350 tons. For I understood navigation well, and being grown weary of a surgeon's employment at sea, which, however, I could exercise upon occasion, I took a skillful young man of that calling, one Robert Purefoy, into my ship. We set sail from Portsmouth upon the 7th day of August, 1710. On the 14th, we met with Captain Pocock of Bristol at Tenerife, who was going to the Bay of Campeche to cut logwood. On the 16th, he was parted from us by a storm. I heard since my return that his ship foundered, and none escaped but one cabin boy. He was an honest man and a good sailor, but a little too positive in his own opinions, which was the cause of his destruction, as it has been with several others. For if he had followed my advice, he might have been safe at home with his family at this time, as well as myself. I had several men who died in my ship of calentures, so that I was forced to get recruits out of the Barbados and the Leeward Islands, where I touched, by the direction of the merchants who employed me, which I had soon too much cause to repent, for I found afterwards that most of them had been buccaneers. I had 50 hands on board, and my orders were that I should trade with the Indians in the South Sea and make what discoveries I could. These rogues, whom I had picked up, debauched my other men, and they all formed a conspiracy to seize the ship and secure me, which I did one morning, rushing into my cabin and bind me hand and foot, threatening to throw me overboard if I offered to stir. I told them I was their prisoner and would submit. This they made me swear to do, and then they unbound me, only fastening one of my legs with a chain near my bed, and placed a sentry at my door with his piece charged, who was commanded to shoot me dead if I attempted my liberty. They sent me down victuals and drink, and took the government of the ship to themselves. Their design was to turn pirates and plunder the Spaniards, which they could not do till they got more men. But first, they resolved to sell the goods in the ship, and then go to Madagascar for recruits, several among them having died since my confinement. They sailed many weeks and traded with the Indians, but I know not what course they took, being kept a close prisoner in my cabin and expecting nothing less than be murdered, as they often threatened me. Upon the 9th day of May, 1711, one James Welch came down to my cabin and said he had orders from the captains to set me ashore. I expostulated with him, but in vain. Neither would he so much as tell me who their new captain was. They forced me into the longboat, let me put on my best suit of clothes, which were as good as new, and take a small bundle of linen, but no arms except my hanger. And they were so civil as not to search my pocket, into which I conveyed what money I had, with some other little necessaries. They rowed about a league, and then set me down on the strand. I desired them to tell me what country it was. They all swore they knew no more than myself, but said that the captain, as I called him, was resolved, after they had sold the lading, so to get rid of me in the first place where they could discover land. They pushed off immediately, advising me to take haste for fear of being overtaken by the tide, and so bade me farewell. In this desolate condition, I advanced forward, and soon got upon firm ground, where I sat down on a bank to rest myself, and consider what I had best to do. When I was a little refreshed, I went up into a country, resolving to deliver myself to the first savages I should meet, and purchase my life from them by some bracelets, glass rings, and other toys, which sailors usually provide themselves with in those voyages, and whereof I had some about me. The land was divided by long rows of trees, not regularly planted, but naturally growing. There was great plenty of grass, and several fields of oats. I walked very circumspectly, for fear of being surprised, or suddenly shot with an arrow from behind, or on either side. I fell into a beaten road, where I saw many tracks of human feet, and some of cows, but most of horses. At last, I beheld several animals in the field, and one or two of the coming forward near the place where I lay gave me an opportunity of distinctly marking their form. Their heads and breasts were covered with a thick hair, some frizzled, and others slank. They had beards like goats, a long ridge of hair down their backs, and the fore parts of their legs and feet, but the rest of their bodies were bare, so that I might see their skins, which were of a brown buff color. They had no tails, nor any hair at all on their buttocks, except about the anus, which I presume nature has placed there to defend them as they sat on the ground, for this posture they used, as well as lying down, and often stood on their hind feet. They climbed high trees as nimbly as a squirrel, for they had strong extended claws before and behind, terminating in sharp points and hooked. They will often spring and bound and leap with prodigious agility. The females were not so large as the males. They had long lank hair on their heads, but none on their faces, nor anything more than a sort of down on the rest of their bodies, except about the anus and punenda. The ducks hung between their forefeet, and often reached almost to the ground as I walked. The hair of both sexes was of several colors, brown, red, black, and yellow. Upon the whole, I never beheld in all my travels so disagreeable an animal, or one against which I naturally conceived so strong an antipathy. so that, thinking I had seen enough, full of contempt and aversion, I got up and pursued the beaten road, hoping it might direct me to the cabin of some Indian. I had not got far when I met one of these creatures full in my way and coming up directly to me. The ugly monster, when he saw me, distorted several ways every feature of his visage, and stared, as at an object he had never seen before. Then, approaching nearer, lifted up his forepaw, whether out of curiosity or mischief I could not tell. But I drew my hanger and gave him a good blow with the flat side of it, for I durst not strike with the edge, fearing the inhabitants might be provoked against me, if they should come to know that I had killed or maimed any of their cattle. When the beast felt the smart, he drew back and roared so loud that the herd of at least 40 came flocking about me from the next field, howling and making odious faces. But I ran to the body of the tree, and leaning my back against it, kept them off by waving my hanger. Several of this cursed brood, getting hold of the branches behind, leaped up into the tree, whence they began to discharge their excrement on my head. However, I escaped pretty well by sticking close to a stem of the tree, but was almost stifled with the filth which fell about me on every side. In the midst of this distress, I observed them all to run away on a sudden, as fast as I could, at which I ventured to leave the tree and pursue the road, wondering what it was that could put them into this fright. But looking at my left hand, I saw a horse walking softly in the field, which my persecutors, having sooner discovered, was the cause of their flight. The horse started a little when he came near me, but soon recovering himself, looked full in my face with manifest tokens of wonder. He viewed my hands and feet, walking round me several times. I would have pursued my journey, but he placed himself directly in the way, yet looking with a very mild aspect, never offering the least violence. We stood gazing at each other for some time. At last I took the boldness to reach my hand towards his neck, with the design to stroke it, using the common style and whistle of jockeys when they are going to handle a strange horse. But this animal seemed to receive my civilities with disdain, shook his head, and bent his brows, softly raising up his right forefoot to remove my hand. Then he neighed 3 or 4 times, but in so different a cadence that I almost began to think he was speaking to himself in some language of his own. While he and I were thus employed, another horse came up, who applying himself to the first in a very formal manner. They gently struck each other's right hoof before, neighing several times by turns and varying the sound, which seemed to be almost articulate. They went some paces off, as if they were to confer together, walking side by side, backward and forward, like persons deliberating upon some affair of weight, but often turning their eyes towards me, as they were to watch that I might not escape. I was amazed to see such actions and behavior in brute beasts, and concluded with myself that if the inhabitants of this country were endued with a proportionable degree of reason, they must needs be the wisest people upon earth. This thought gave me so much comfort that I resolved to go forward until I could discover some horse or village, or meet with any of the natives, leaving the 2 horses to discourse together as I pleased. But the first, who was a dapple gray, observing me to steal off, neighed after me in so expressive a tone that I fancied myself to understand what he meant. Whereupon I turned back and came near to him to expect his farther command. But concealing my fear as much as I could, for I began to be in some pain how this adventure might terminate, and the reader will easily believe I did not much like my present situation. The two horses came upon close to me, looking with great earnestness upon my face and hands. The grey steed rubbed my heart all round with his right forefoot, then discomposed it so much that I was forced to adjust it better by taking it off and settling it again. Whereat both he and his companion, who was a brown bay, appeared to be much surprised. The latter felt the lapel of my coat, and finding it to hang loose about me, they both looked with new signs of wonder. He stroked my right hand, seeming to admire the softness and color. But he squeezed it so hard between his hoof and his pastern that I was forced to roar. After which, they both touched me with all possible tenderness. They were under great perplexity about my shoes and stockings, which they felt very often, neighing to each other, and using various gestures, not unlike those of a philosopher, when he would attempt to solve some new and difficult phenomenon. Upon the whole, the behavior of these animals were so orderly and rational, so acute and judicious, that I at last concluded they must needs be magicians, who had thus metamorphosed themselves upon some design, and seeing a stranger in the way, resolved to divert themselves with him, or, perhaps, were really amazed at the sight of a man so very different in habit, feature, and complexion from those who might probably live in so remote a climate. Upon the strength of this reasoning, I ventured to address them in the following manner: Gentlemen, if you be conjurers, as I have good cause to believe, you can understand my language. Therefore, I make bold to let you worships know that I am a poor distressed Englishman, driven by his misfortunes upon your coast, and I entreat one of you to let me ride upon his back, as if he were a real horse, to some house or village where I can be relieved. In return of which favor, I will make you a present of this knife and bracelet. Taking them out of my pocket, the two creatures stood silent while I spoke, seeming to listen with great attention, and when I had ended, they neighed frequently towards each other, as if they were engaged in serious conversation. I plainly observed that their language expressed the passions very well, and the words might, with little pains, be resolved into an alphabet more easily than the Chinese. I could frequently distinguish the word Yahoo, which was repeated by each of them several times, and although it was impossible for me to conjecture what it meant, yet while the two horses were busy in conversation, I endeavored to practice this word upon my tongue, and as soon as they were silent, I boldly pronounced Yahoo in a loud voice, imitating at the same time, as near as I could, the neighing of a horse, at which they were both visibly surprised. And the grey repeated the same word twice, as if they meant to teach me the right accent, wherein I spoke after him as well as I could, and found myself perceivably to improve every time, though very far from any degree of perfection. Then the bay tried me with the second word, much harder to be pronounced, by reducing it to the English orthography, may be spelt thus quinem. I did not succeed in this so well as in the former, but after 2 or 3 farther trials I had better fortune, and they both appeared amazed at my capacity. After some further discourse, which I then conjectured might relate to me, my two friends took their leaves with the same compliment of striking each other's hoof, and the grey made me signs that I should walk before him, wherein I thought it prudent to comply, till I could find a better director. When I offered to slacken my pace, he would cry, "Hun, hun." I guessed his meaning and gave him to understand, as well as I could, that I was weary and not able to walk faster, upon which he could stand a while to let me rest. Chapter 2. The author conducted by a Huinem to his house. The house described. The author's reception. The food of the Huinems. The author in distress for want of meat is at last relieved. His manner of feeding in this country. Having traveled about 3 miles, we came to a long kind of building made of timber stuck in the ground and wattled across. The roof was low and covered with straw. I now began to be a little comforted, and took out some toys which travelers usually carry for presents to the savage Indians of America and other parts, in hopes that people of the house would be thereby encouraged to receive me kindly. The horse made me a sign to go in first. It was a large room with a smooth clay floor, and a rack and manger extending the whole length on one side. There were 3 nags and 2 mares, not eating, but some of them sitting down upon their hams, which I very much wondered at. But wondered more to see the rest employed in domestic business. These seemed but ordinary cattle. However, this confirmed my first opinion that the people who could so far civilize brute animals must needs excel in wisdom all the nations of the world. The gray came in just after, and thereby prevented any ill treatment which the others might have given me. He neighed to them several times in a style of authority, and received answers. Beyond this room, there were 3 others, reaching the length of the house, to which you passed through 3 doors, opposite to each other in the manner of a vista. We went through the second room towards the third. Here the gray walked in first, beckoning me to attend. I waited in the second room and got ready my presents for the master and mistress of the house. There were 2 knives, 3 bracelets of false pearls, a small looking glass, and a bead necklace. The horse neighed 3 or 4 times, and I waited to hear some answers in a human voice, but I heard no other returns than in the same dialect, only 1 or 2 a little shriller than his. I began to think that this house must belong to some person of great note among them, because there appeared so much ceremony before I can gain admittance. But that a man of quality should be served all by horses was beyond my comprehension. I feared my brain was disturbed by my sufferings and misfortunes. I roused myself and looked about me in the room where I was left alone. This was furnished like the first, only after a more elegant manner. I rubbed my eyes often, but the same object still occurred. I pinched my arms and sides to awake myself, hoping I might be a dream. I then absolutely concluded that all these appearances could be nothing else but necromancy and magic. But I had no time to pursue these reflections, for the grey horse came to the door and made me a sign to follow him into a third room, where I saw a very comely mare, together with a coat and foal, sitting on their haunches upon mats of straw, not unartfully made and perfectly neat and clean. The mare, soon after my entrance, rose from her mat, and coming up close, after having nicely observed my hands and face, gave me a most contemptuous look, and turning to a horse, I heard the word Yahoo often repeated betwixt them, the meaning of which word I could not then comprehend, although it was the first I had learned to pronounce. But I was soon better informed, to my everlasting mortification, for the horse, beckoning to me with his head and repeating the hun, as he did upon the road, which I understood was to attend him, led me out into a kind of court where was another building at some distance from the house. Here we entered, and I saw three of those detestable creatures which I first met after my landing, feeding upon roots and the flesh of some animals, which I afterwards found to be that of asses and dogs, and now and then a cow, dead by accidental disease. They were all tied by the neck with strong withes fastened to a beam. They held their food between the claws of their 4 feet and tore it with their teeth. The master horse ordered a sorrel nag, one of his servants, to untie the largest of these animals and take him into a yard. The beast and I were brought closer together, and by our countenances diligently compared both by master and the servant, who thereupon repeated several times the word Yahoo. My horror and astonishment are not to be described when I observed in this abominable animal a perfect human figure. The face of it, indeed, was flat and broad, the nose depressed, the lips large, and the mouth wide. But these differences are common to all savage nations, where the lineaments of the countenance are distorted by the natives suffering their infants to lie groveling on the earth, or by carrying them on their backs, nuzzling with their face against the mother's shoulder. The 4 feet of the Yahoo differed from my hands in nothing else but the length of the nails, the coarseness and the brownness of the palms, and the hairiness on the backs. There were the same resemblance between our feet, with the same differences, which I knew very well, though the horse did not, because of my shoes and stockings. The same in every part of our bodies, except as to hairiness and color, which I have already described. The great difficulty that seemed to stick with the 2 horses was to see the rest of my body so very different from that of Yahoo, for which I was obliged to my clothes, whereof they had no conception. The Soranac offered me a root, which he held, after their manner, as we shall describe in its proper place, between his hoof and pastern. I took it in my hand, and, having smelt it, returned it to him again as civilly as I could. He brought out of the Yahoo's kennel a piece of ashes flesh, but it smelt so offensively that I turned from it with loathing. He then threw it to the Yahoo, by whom it was greedily devoured. He afterwards showed me a wisp of hay and the fetlock full of oats, but I shook my head to signify that either of these were food for me. And indeed, I now apprehended that I must absolutely starve if I did not get to some of my own species. For as to those filthy Yahoos, although there were few greater lovers of mankind at that time than myself, yet I confess I never saw any sensitive beings so detestable on all counts. And the more I came near them, the more hateful they grew, while I stayed in that country. This the master horse observed by my behavior, and therefore sent the Yahoo back to his kennel. He then put his forefoot to its mouth, at which I was much surprised, although he did it with ease, and with a motion that appeared perfectly natural, and made other signs to know that I would eat.
But I could not return him such an answer that he was able to apprehend. And if he had understood me, I did not see how it was possible to contrive any way for finding myself nourishment. While we were thus engaged, I observed a cow passing by, whereupon I pointed to her and expressed the desire to go and milk her. This had its effect, for he led me back into the house and ordered a mare servant to open a room where a good store of milk lay in earthen and wooden vessels, after a very orderly and cleanly manner. She gave me a large bowlful, of which I drank very heartily and found myself well refreshed. About noon, I saw coming towards the house a kind of vehicle drawn like a sledge by 4 yahoos. There was in it an old steed who seemed to be of quality. He alighted with his hind feet forward, having by accident got a hurt in his left forefoot. He came to dine with our horse, who received him with great civility. They dined in the bedroom, and had oats boiled in milk for the second course, which the old horse ate warm but rest cold. Their mangers were placed circular in the middle of the room, and divided into several partitions, round which they sat on their haunches, upon bosses of straw. In the middle was a large rack, with angles answering to every partition of the manger, so that each horse and mare ate their own way, and their own measure of oats and milk, with much decency and regularity. The behavior of the young colt and foal appeared very modest, and that of the master and mistress extremely cheerful and complaisant to their guest. The grey ordered me to stand by him, and much discourse passed between him and his friend concerning me, as I found by the strangers often looking on me, and the frequent repetition of the word Yahoo. I happened to wear my gloves, which a master grey observing seemed perplexed, discovering signs of wonder what I had done to my 4 feet. He put his hoof 3 or 4 times to them, as if he would signify that I should reduce them to their former shape, which I presently did, pulling off both my gloves and putting them into my pocket. This occasioned further talk, and I saw the company was pleased with my behavior, whereof I soon found the good effects. I was ordered to speak the few words I understood, and while they were at dinner, the master taught me the names of 4 milk, fire, water, and some others, for which I could readily pronounce after him, after from my youth a great facility in learning languages. When dinner was done, the master horse took me aside, and by signs and words made me understand the concern he was in that I had nothing to eat. Oats in their tongue are called hlun. This word I pronounced 2 or 3 times, for though I had refused them at first, yet, upon second thoughts, I considered that I could contrive to make of them a kind of bread, which might be sufficient with milk to keep me alive, till I could make my escape to some other country, and to creatures of my own species. The horse immediately ordered a white mare servant of his family to bring me a good quantity of oats in a sort of wooden tray. These I heated before the fire as well as I could, and rubbed them till the husks came off, which I made a shift to winnow from the grain. I ground and beat them between 2 stones, then took water and made them into a paste of cake, which I toasted at the fire and eat warm with milk. It was at first a very insipid diet, though common enough in many parts of Europe, but grew tolerable by time, and having been which I toasted at the fire and having been often reduced to hard fare in my life, this was not the first experiment I had made how easy nature is satisfied. And I cannot but observe that I never had 1 hour's sickness while I stayed in this island. It is true, I sometimes made a shift to catch a rabbit or bird by springs made of yahoo's hairs. And I often gathered wholesome herbs, which I boiled and ate as salads with my bread. And now and then, for a rarity, I made a little butter and drank the whey. I was at first at a great loss for salt, but custom soon reconciled me to the want of it. And I am confident that the frequent use of salt among us is an effect of luxury, and was first introduced only as a provocative to drink, except where it is necessary for preserving flesh in long voyages, or in places remote from great markets. For we observe no animal to be fond of it, but man. And as to myself, when I left this country, it was a great while before I could enjoy the taste of it in anything that I ate. This is enough to say upon the subject of my diet, wherewith other travelers fill their books, as if the readers were personally concerned whether we fare well or ill. However, it was necessary to mention this matter, lest the world should think it impossible that I could find sustenance for 3 years in such a country, and among such inhabitants. When it grew towards evening, the master horse ordered a place for me to lodge in. It was but 6 yards from the house and separated from the stable of the yahoos. Here I got some straw, and covering myself with my own clothes, slept very sound. But I was in a short time better accommodated, as a reader shall know hereafter, when I come to treat more particularly about my way of living.
刚刚有降落吗？嘿，等一下，刚刚有降落吗？不好意思，如果有降落的话，我刚刚没有看到。如果有的话，可以跟我讲一下是哪位 V 朋友降落过来吗？不好意思，我刚刚基本上就是专心的看着文本在念，没有切过来再看。对，好，我之后会叫到台轨里，如果有降落，但我没有及时招待的话，我会请雨晴们跟我说。哦，阿龟吗？啊，所以阿龟是手动降落过来的吗？谢谢阿龟，谢谢你，谢谢大家，谢谢来。那我先把第3章念完。我先跟大家打招呼，谢谢丽的记得喝水，我要喝。萨卡莫多妹妹的安安，谢谢二龙的爱心，台湾说安安，谢谢你爱心。手动降落，阿龟那边来了，谢谢过来，然后也谢谢阿龟来，开台辛苦了。那我继续念我全部念完再跟大家聊天。我念到那个置顶的那个文本，念完第2章了，现在要念第3章，第4部的第3章是《格里弗游记》。 那我通常都是先念，最后才一次用中文解说，所以我先念。阿龟不要不好意思，没事的，你这样过来是好事，谢谢你来，很高兴看到你。那我继续念，然后念完之后再跟大家说话。不要不好意思，谢谢你。那我继续哦。Chapter 3. The author studies to learn the language. The Huinim, his master, assists in teaching him. The language described. Several Huinims of quality come out of curiosity to see the author. He gives his master a short account of his voyage. My principal endeavor was to learn the language, which my master, for so I should henceforth call him, and his children, and every servant of his house, were desirous to teach me, for they looked upon it as a prodigy, that a brute animal should discover such marks of a rational creature. I pointed to everything, and inquired at the name of it, which I wrote down in my journal book when I was alone, and corrected my bad accent by desiring those of the family to pronounce it often. In this employment, Asaranag, one of the under servants, was very ready to assist me. In speaking, they pronounced through the nose and throat, and their language approaches nearest to the High Dutch or German of any I know in Europe, but is much more graceful and significant. The Emperor Charles V made almost the same observation when he said that if he were to speak to his horse, it should be in High Dutch. The curiosity and impatience of my master were so great that he spent many hours of his leisure to instruct me. He was convinced, as he afterwards told me, that I must be Yahoo. But my teachableness, civility, and cleanliness astonished him, which were qualities altogether opposite to those animals. He was most perplexed about my clothes, reasoning sometimes with himself whether they were a part of my body, for I never pulled them off till the family were asleep, and got them on before they waked in the morning. My master was eager to learn whence I came, how I acquired those appearances of reason, which I discovered in all my actions, and got them on how I acquired those appearances of reason which I discovered in all my actions, and to know my story from my own mouth, which he hoped he should soon do by the great proficiency I made in learning and pronouncing their words and sentences. To help my memory, I formed all I learned into the English alphabet, and wrote the words down with the translations. This last, after some time, I ventured to do in my master's presence. It caused me much trouble to explain him what I was doing, for the inhabitants have not the least ideas of books or literature. In about 10 weeks' time, I was able to understand most of his questions, and in 3 months could give him some tolerable answers. He was extremely curious to know from what part of the country I came, and how I was taught to imitate a rational creature, because the Yahoos, whom he saw I exactly resembled in my head, hands, and face, that were only visible, with some appearance of cunning, and the strongest disposition to mischief, were observed to be the most unteachable of all brutes. I answered that I came over the sea from a far place with many others of my own kind, and a great hollow vessel made of the bodies of trees, that my companions forced me to land on this coast, and then left me to shift for myself. It was with some difficulty, but by the help of many signs, that I brought him to understand me. He replied that I must needs to be mistaken, or that I say the thing which was not, for they have no word in their language to express lying or falsehood. He knew it was impossible that there could be a country beyond the sea, or that a parcel of brutes could move a wooden vessel whither they pleased upon water.
He was sure no Hunim alive could make such a vessel, nor would trust Yahoos to manage it. The word Hunim in their tongue signifies a horse, and in its etymology, the perfection of nature. I told my master that I was at a loss for expression, but would improve as fast as I could, and hoped, in a short time, I would be able to tell him wonders. He was pleased to direct his own mare, his coat and foal, and the servants of the family to take all opportunities of instructing me. And every day, for 2 or 3 hours, he was at the same pains himself. Several horses and mares of quality in the neighborhood came often to our house upon the report spread of a wonderful Yahoo that could speak like a Hunim, and seemed in his words and actions to discover some glimmerings of reason. These delighted to converse with me. They put many questions and received such answers I was able to return. By all these advantages, I made so great a progress that in 5 months from my arrival, I understood whatever was spoken and could express myself tolerably well. The Hunims, who came to visit my master out of a design of seeing and talking with me, could hardly believe me to be a right Yahoo because my body had a different covering from others of my kind. They were astonished to observe me without the usual hair or skin except on my head, face, and hands. But I discovered that secret to my master upon an accident which happened about a fortnight before. I have already told the reader that every night when the family were gone to bed, it was my custom to strip and cover myself with my clothes. It happened one morning early that my master sent for me by the Sornag, who was his valet. When he came, I was fast asleep, my clothes fallen off on one side, and my shirt above my waist. I awaked at the noise he made, and observed him to deliver his message in some disorder, after which he went to my master, and in a great fright gave him a very confused account of what he had seen. This I presently discovered, for, going as soon as I was dressed to pay my attendance upon his honor, he asked me the meaning of what his servant had reported, that I was not the same thing when I slept, as I appeared to be at other times. That his valet assured him some part of me was white, some yellow, at least not so white, and some brown. I had hitherto concealed the secret of my dress in order to distinguish myself as much as possible from that cursed race of Yahoos. But now I found it in vain to do so any longer. Besides, I considered that my clothes and shoes would soon wear out, which already were in a declining condition, and must be supplied by some contrivance from the hides of Yahoos or other brutes, whereby the whole secret would be known. I therefore told my master that in the country whence I came, those of my kind always covered their bodies with the hairs of certain animals prepared by art, as well for decency as to avoid the inclemencies of hair, both hot and cold. For which, as to my own person, I would give him immediate conviction, if it pleased to commend me. Only desiring his excuse, if I did not expose those parts that nature taught us to conceal, he said, "My discourse was all very strange, but especially the last part, for he could not understand why nature should teach us to conceal what nature had given. That neither himself nor family were ashamed of any parts of their bodies. But, however, I might do as I pleased. Whereupon I first unbuttoned my coat and pulled it off. I did the same with my waistcoat. I drew off my shoes, stockings, and breeches. I let my shirt down to my waist and drew up the button. fastening it like a girdle about my middle to hide my nakedness. My master observed the whole performance with great signs of curiosity and admiration. He took up all my clothes in his passion, one piece after another, and examined them diligently. He then stroked my body very gently and looked round me several times, after which he said it was plain I must be a perfect Yahoo, but that I differed very much from the rest of my species in the softness, whiteness, and smoothness of my skin, my want of hair in several parts of my body, the shape and shortness of my claws behind and before, and my affectation of walking continually on my 2 hinder feet. He desired to see no more, and gave me leave to put on my clothes again, for I was shuddering with cold. I expressed my uneasiness at his giving me so often the appellation of Yahoo, an odious animal for which I had so utter a hatred and contempt. I begged he would forbear applying that word to me, and make the same order in his family and among his friends whom he suffered to see me. I requested likewise that the secret of my having a false covering to my body might be known to none but himself, at least as long as my present clothing should last. For as to what the Soranag, his valet, had observed, his honor might command him to conceal it. All this my master very graciously consented to, and thus the secret was kept till my clothes began to wear out, which I was forced to supply by several contrivances that shall hereafter be mentioned. In the meantime, he desired I would go on with my utmost diligence to learn their language, because he was more astonished at my capacity for speech and reason than at the figure of my body, whether it were covered or not, adding that he waited with some impatience to hear the wonders which I promised to tell him. From thenceforward, he doubled the pains he had been at to instruct me. He brought me into all company and made them treat me with civility, because, as he told them privately, this would put me into great humor and make me more diverting. Every day, when I waited on him, beside the trouble he was at in teaching, he would ask me several questions concerning myself, which I answered as well as I could, and by these means he had already received some general ideas, though very imperfect. It would be tedious to relate the several steps by which I advanced to a more regular conversation, but the first account I gave of myself in any order and length was to this purpose: that I came from a very far country, as I already had attempted to tell him, with about 50 more of my own species, that we traveled upon the seas in a great hollow vessel made of wood, larger than his honor's house. I described the ship to him in the best terms I could, and explained, by the help of my handkerchief displayed how it was driven far away by the wind, that upon a quarrel among us, I was set on shore on this coast, where I walked forward, without knowing whither, till he delivered me from the persecution of those execrable Yahoos. He asked me who made the ship, and how it was possible that the whims of my country would leave it to the management of brutes. My answer was that I durst proceed no further in my relation, unless he would give me his word and honor that he would not be offended, and then I would tell him the wonders I had so often promised. He agreed, and I went on by assuring him that the ship was made by creatures like myself, who, in all the countries I had traveled, as well as in my own, were the only governing rational animals, and that upon my arrival hither, I was as much astonished to see the Houyhnhnms act like rational beings as he or his friends could be, in finding some marks of reason in a creature he was pleased to call a Yahoo, to which I owned my resemblance in every part, but could not account for their degenerate and brutal nature. I said further, that if good fortune ever restored me to my native country to relate my travels hither, as I resolved to do, everybody would believe that I say the thing that was not, that I invented the story out of my own head, and, with all possible respect to himself, his family, and friends, and on his promise of not being offended, our countrymen would hardly think it probable that the Houyhnhnm should be the presiding creature of a nation, and the Yahoo the brute. 好，今天念完《格列佛游记》的第3章，它第4部里面又有分12个章节，这样。今天念的1到3章，它是这样写的，好，嘿，来跟大家打个招呼，对，再跟阿哥说一次，谢谢手动降落过来，不要觉得不好意思，是的，谢谢你，反而是非常感谢你，谢谢小船仔的爱心，谢谢大家的爱心，谢谢无名的爱心。然后每念完1章有喝一点水，来讲一下刚刚故事里发生什么事吧。其实这有点像是朗读版的同步视听，如果有人有打开浏览器看的话。我以前是读过这些故事的，但是忘记了，所以一边读，也就是有点一边帮我找回这些记忆。那我来讲一下刚刚，这个《格列佛游记》第4部的1到3章发生什么事。整个《格列佛游记》开场之后有稍微讲一下，整个《格列佛游记》总共有4部。第1部是大家最熟知的，他去到一个小人国，所以相对而言他就变成那里的巨人，这样。然后第2部是反过来，他去到一个巨人国，所以相对而言他变成一个超小人。第3部是他去了很多遥远的地方，包括拉普达，后来这个字被借去宫崎骏的天空之城嘛，然后包括日本，所以可能对这个17、18世纪的欧洲或者英国人而言，日本的存在呢，就像是一个拉普达之类的虚拟国度。好，然后再来是我们今天念的节录第4章是马国，就是马，就是 horse 那个马。这个国家呢叫做 The Country of the Houyhnhnms， 就在这个国家的那个马这个国家的语言而言呢，马的发音是 Houyhnhnms， 有点像马的那个的叫声，就是偶尔会看到撞声词说马的叫声是灰灰灰嘛，或嘶嘶嘶，那个灰那个字呢 Houyhnhnm 就是马的那个撞声词。西语安安，欢迎我念完《格列佛游记》第4部的1到3章，就是今天我想念的段落，然后正在解释发生什么事。对，所以如果是马的叫声的话呢，有一种撞声词是像这样嘛，灰灰灰，这样，我好像可以把它打在这个上面，所以呢，这个主角是 Gulliver 格列佛。或格里夫，我现在采用的这个格里夫的这个翻译呢，在资讯栏有，是一个国科会经典翻译计划的译本。那它当然有很多种翻译，有格列佛、格列夫之类的。现在采用格里夫这个翻译，对，我蛮推荐那个译本。然后呢，在第4章的时候，他去了这个国家，这样子要怎么拼啊？HOU。因为它基本上是一个撞声词，所以我也不太知道怎么 HOUYHNM YHNHNMS 这样。他去了这个国家呢，叫做 The Country of the Houyhnhnms， 这个我就称之为马好了，是那个国家用来称呼马
的这个字，这个字就是指马。然后呢，雅虎基本上是人。这个国家呢，格列佛游记在这一篇呢，其实还蛮掉圣旨的哦。老实说，大家会用马或是会你们来称呼马，然后雅虎或人来称呼人。关于这个国家的叙述还蛮掉圣旨的。现在讲一下，在这一部的第一章啊，就是格列佛结束了前面他去了其他地方的旅行，然后他暂时回家待了一阵子之后呢，他又收到了一个邀约，说你来当这艘船船长吧。他说好，所以他又从英国出航了。不过呢，他在船上被他的船员们背叛，所以他的船员因为想要夺走财产，夺走那艘船，所以把他丢到一个不知名的岸上，就是他不知道他被丢到哪里。那他经历过这些，他被船员背叛，然后被丢到一个不知名的陆地上。他醒来之后呢，首先看到的是一些哺乳类动物，然后他一看这些哺乳类动物就觉得心生嫌恶，他觉得非常讨厌，然后他就形容这些哺乳类动物可能背上有像是一道山脊，然后长着体毛，然后手上有长长的爪子，总共有4只这样，然后就是他就形容的是多么令人嫌恶，这是一个多么令人嫌恶的生物这样。那他就想要赶快离开这些生物，但是他应该说他尝试着要发出声音跟这些生物沟通，但这些生物就爬到树上开始攻击他，然后开始大便，真的就是开始大便。然后他就赶快跑离这个地方，在原野上遇到了几匹马，就是马。他看着这些马，然后他觉得他莫名其妙觉得这些马好像在互相沟通，讨论关于他格列佛的事情。所以在几次试探之后呢，他听到马讲话好像有一些声调，他们好像在用只有他们听得懂的语言在沟通。所以格列佛就试着非常犹豫，试着要用英文，因为格列佛是英国人嘛，跟那些马沟通。那些马当然是听不懂，但是呢，他们那些马在跟其他的马互相沟通，他们一边看着格列佛，一边打量格列佛的同时呢，他们口中一直讲着雅虎这个词，就大家熟知的那个雅虎奇摩知识家那个雅虎 YHO 这个词，他们就一直讲雅虎这个词。那最后格列佛虽然他们还是无法懂，格列佛跟那群马无法懂对方的语言，但是呢，他们最后还是靠手势或是其他方法。那些马呢，其中有一匹带领格列佛去到他的家中。那在路上，格列佛就想说：哇，如果这个国家的人可以把马变成这么聪明的生物，这个国家的人肯定是全世界智商最高的人种。那这是第一章发生的事。那第二章呢，就是格列佛跑到了，就是被那只马带到了那个马的家。他之后就叫 horse master， 就是马主人这种感觉，就是那个马是一家之主，那个家里面呢，就是像是夫人、小孩、仆人，就全都是马，这样就是那是一个充满马的家族。然后这个时候格列佛还在想说，这个房子的主人到底在哪？他怎么养一群这么聪明的马？这个国家人怎么养出一群这么有文明的马？那与此同时呢，他受到这群马的招待，这群马，然后还观察这群马在吃东西的时候是多么的长幼有序，他们多么整齐的吃东西，然后这群马宾主尽欢的样子。最后，格列佛就是又跟着那个马主人，就是开始带他到家里的那匹马呢，学了几个字。假如说怎么用那个马的语言发音，他最开始是学了马 Huinem 这个字嘛，然后再来又学了雅虎这个字，是指他在路上看到那个令人非常嫌恶的生物。我已经打剧透了，就是人。然后他后来又学了一些字，像是什么牛奶、谷物、火之类的。 那他在这个家呢，就是那群马，他们就是睡在干草上，然后吃着谷物这样。他在担心他没有东西吃，不过后来他跟那个马就是比手画脚，发出一些新事业一番，所以那个马就给他一些牛奶、一些谷物，然后他就自己做了烤饼吃。他最后就是睡在一堆干草堆上，就是他铺着干草，把自己身上的衣服脱下来盖在身上，然后这样子睡觉。他就这样子生活。那与此同时呢，从那只马主人这边学到了一些不同的字。那再来第3章呢，这个故事啊是揭露着，首先渐渐揭露一件事，就是说这个国家并没有所谓的人，或者说这个国家呢，在生物链顶端，在食物链顶端、生态系顶端，具有所谓的理性思考、沟通、社会能力的动物是马，在这个国家呢，等同于人类社会的人这样子的地位，在这个国家的这个生物呢是马。然后这个国家呢，所谓的人类就是一种野蛮的哺乳类，有点像猴子那种感觉，就是一种野蛮的，然后污秽不堪的哺乳类。然后这些马呢，他们可能会豢养这些人类，就是雅虎，然后或是这些人类就是野生的在路上，那当然是没有穿衣服、没有文明这样的样子。所以这是第一个渐渐揭露的事实。那再来呢是格列佛，因为他来的时候，他来到这个马的国度的时候，他身上穿着衣服裤子，所以最开始那些马在互相沟通，他们一直讲雅虎这个字，就他们觉得格列佛实在长得很像这个他们国家里面这个污秽不堪的人这个物种。可是格列佛很干净，然后他的可能脸上手上没有这么多毛发，然后他又穿着衣服，所以他好像很像雅虎，可是他又不是。所以于此期间呢，就是格列佛就在那个马主人家生活下来了，睡在干草堆上，然后吃着谷物烤成的饼干这样。那一只马主人有其他的马朋友，然后也都是有点像是绅士，就 gentleman 那种上流阶级的马朋友，他们就一一的跑来这个马主人的家里参观观赏格列佛。就天哪，竟然有一只雅虎是衣着整齐，然后好像很可以教化，好像很快就学会马语了，竟然有这样子的一只雅虎。但他们还是一直在想说，这个格列佛呢，到底是不是一个雅虎这个物种这样。然后第3章呢，就是格列佛这样生活下去，他学了马的语言，跟那个马主人就最开始带他回家那个开始沟通，然后可能过了5个月之后，那个马主人告诉他的事，他都听得懂了，问他的问题，他也都可以回答一些了。那有个意外是，因为他前面有说他睡觉的时候是要把他的衣服脱下来，然后盖在身上当被子嘛，所以有一天那个马家里有个仆人因为马主人的命令要去叫醒他的时候呢，不小心看到就是格列佛没穿衣服，然后他衣服盖在身上当被子的样子。因为平常格列佛不会想让马看到自己的裸体，然后他都会衣着整齐。但那个时候是他还没起床，刚好仆人去叫他的时候看到，所以仆人就也是一只马，回去跟马主人报告那件事情。马主人就把格列佛叫到他的房间，请他把衣服脱下来，然后仔细看了一下，得出的结论是：你真的是一个雅虎，就是真的是外面那个污秽不堪，然后无法教化的野蛮，然后肮脏的一个物种。那可是呢，你是一个完美的雅虎，你会穿衣服，你很快就学习如何跟我们沟通，你不会把自己弄脏，你的指甲很干净，没有乱长长，然后你没有无尽增生的毛发，所以他被判定为是个完美且文明的雅虎，就是你是雅虎，可是你是个完美的雅虎。那格列佛就请这个马主人不要把这件事情跟其他人说，就是他真的是一个雅虎，甚至不要跟其他人说。那马主人就答应了。所以今天的故事讲到这边呢， 发生了几件事情。格列佛他在出航的路上，因为被自己的船员背叛，被丢到一个不知名的陆地上。他这个陆地上呢，首先遇到几个他一看就觉得很嫌恶的物种，后来发现是这块土地上的人。可是这块土地上呢，有发展出文明社会、沟通系统、思想系统，或者作为一个理性生物的这个物种呢，是马，而人只是一个低等动物。这么讲很过分，但是在这个故事里设定是这样。然后他被一匹马带回家，开始在学就是这个马国，就是群马沟通的语言。那因为他穿着衣服，然后他很快学习这些语言，所以这个马跟就是这个马其他朋友很惊讶于他，就是明明这么像是外面的雅虎这种物种，可他却这么文明，这么可教化。他就住在那个马家里，所以这是一方面，是他被马当成是一种奇怪的动物观察。然后再来是另外一个呢，是他开始融入这个马社会的生活。他开始想说，哇天啊，这群马他们是这么完美，就是他开始想说，就是像是这些马他们吃饭的时候呢，是多么宾主尽欢，然后他们不会把东西弄得糟糕，然后甚至马的语言里面呢没有谎话或者谎言的概念。所以当格列佛讲的东西什么什么东西，然后那个马主人不相信的时候，那个马主人就会说你在说不是的事情，因为他基本上没有谎言这个概念，代表这个马的社会是多么淳朴且本真，就是这么淳朴到你根本不需要一个字来形容说谎这个概念，对吧？所以格列佛在说他来自一个什么海洋之外的另外一个地方的时候，那个马就不相信，怎么可能雅虎这个族群这个生物有办法造船，就是用木头造成一个东西，然后漂洋过海过来这边，他不相信，他又说你在说一个不是的事情。对，那第3章的最后呢，就是格列佛的那个经过他被揭发，他确实跟外面的那个就是野生的雅虎是同个种族这件事情，但他被那个马主任认定他是雅虎，可他是一个完美的雅虎。之后呢，格列佛这个时候语言也学得差不多，马的语言也学得差不多，可以好好沟通了。所以他那个马主任就说：“那你要多告诉我一点你本来的故事。”那格列佛就开始说，他原本在的地方呢就是他先确保了马不会听到他的话生气。啊，马说：“哦，好，我不会生气。”之后，格列佛就说：“好，我原本来这个地方呢，那个地方马是作为一种畜生，就是会跟你们一样的物种，马是作为一种畜生，然后雅虎跟我一样的这个物种，才是在文明社会的顶端，有思考、有社会系统、有人际关系、有语言的物种。”这样，故事第3节的故事到这里结束。到目前为止是故事的25%，就它总共有12节，然后我念完第3节。那这个故事其实还蛮掉线的。Yeah， 因为一边说这个除了功能很多，除了我自己念英文之外，可能有些人习惯英文之后会变得不那么排斥英文，或许会有这个好处。然后还有烘水，那也是介绍一些故事，所以不太确定大家现在挂台是有听到哪个程度。不过反正档就留在这边，大家以后突然有兴趣也可以再回来看。对，好，今天的那个故事的解释是到这边。那如果我想想，大家有觉得这个故事蛮掉线的吗？有一个人他漂流到一个有马作为就是你叫什么最顶端生物的地方，然后人就是一个比在人类世界马还不如在地上爬，然后大家都觉得很脏的畜生。但是因为他穿着衣服，他跟那些在地上爬的所谓人类或者脏脏的这个物种不一样，所以他就被一只马接回家， 然后被当成一种珍奇异兽，每天都有不同的马来看。哦天哪，这里有一个完美的雅虎，跟外面的那种不一样。然后与此同时，他就学了这些马的语言，开始要跟大家回家那个马说他的故事。然后他还发现这个马的世界是多么的淳朴善良，是多么的叫做有礼貌有文明。所以这我觉得还蛮有趣的，就是他在讲马的语言没有说谎的概念这件事情，或者说他最开始遇到了一群雅虎，这个时候没有点名是人嘛，但是后面就点名雅虎其实就是人类，就这种哺乳类动物。然后他最开始看到这种哺乳类动物在野外，他第一眼看到他们，他觉得非常嫌恶，他从没有看过一种物种让他这么嫌恶，这件事情也很有趣。然后最后还有一点我刚刚忘记讲到，就是他开始跟马主人，他语言学差不多，开始跟马主人讲他来的地方的故事的时候呢，他也说我们那个地方的雅虎，就是所谓的人类这种哺乳类，在你们这边是就是污秽，然后很在地上爬那种，但是我们那个地方呢，我来的那个地方，所有雅虎，所有人类都跟我一样穿着衣服，因为衣服可以帮助我们御寒，然后帮助我们不让怪东西或细菌跑到身体，最重要的是帮我们遮掩一些天生就不该露出来的部位。然后那个马主人听到这句话，他就跟他说：“我不懂，为什么自然给你的东西会是自然不能露出来的部位？”就所以那边的马也是没有所谓的衣服的概念。这边就还蛮有趣，因为人类的文明啊，至少以西方文明而言，很大一部分是由衣服来象征的嘛。大家应该听过伊甸园的故事吧？人类的原罪，或是人类之所以开始发展了所谓的智慧，人类有了跟上帝不同的自主或叛逆意识呢，是因为夏娃在听了蛇的诱惑之后，吃下了智慧果实。一说是苹果，也有人说不是苹果，但他就吃下那个果实之后，他开始有了意识或是知觉，他突然觉得人裸体赤身露体没有穿衣服很羞耻，所以穿了衣服。那亚当也吃了，所以他们穿了衣服。上帝就发现啊，你们偷吃了那个我说不能吃的智慧果实。然后亚当跟夏娃被逐出伊甸园，所以才来到人类世界。所以人类世界文明的，至少以西方文明故事里面呢，很大一个文明的象征当然就是衣服。所以很有趣的是，格列佛他之所以被当成是一个完美的人形哺乳类动物，就是完美的这种物种，是因为他穿着衣服。他没有被当成就是路上那种可比起令人一看就心生厌恶的物种，是因为他穿着衣服。那但是呢，当他跟那个马主任讲说他来的地方呢，所有人都穿着衣服，这是一种文明象征，因为我们要遮住本来就不能露出来的部位的时候，那个马就说为什么？为什么是大自然给你的身体，你却不能露出来呢？所以这边代表的就是那个马的世界呢，它拥有一种截然不同的文明体系。在那个马的世界里呢，他们的思考很淳朴，他们不觉得有什么身体部位是不能露出来，所以他们当然也没有类似这种什么衣服关于就是怎样穿衣服的羞耻啊，然后或是衣服所表示的阶级啊或什么，他们没有。那再来是他们的语言里面呢，甚至没有说谎这个字，代表他们是一个不会说谎的文明。那在后面故事的后几章会越来越揭露出来，格列佛他作为一个漂流过来的很奇怪的不同物种或是外地人，他会越来越欣赏马国或是这个马社会的文明。这个文明跟人类文明很不一样嘛，他们不需要衣服，他们没有说谎的概念。那格列佛在接下来故事他会越来越欣赏这个马社会文明，他会具体描述他在内的生活，他观察到的。那当然与此同时，他除了他在观察那个马社会之外呢，他也被那些马观察着，作为一个 perfect 雅虎，一个完美的低贱物种。所以这如果去想一下，这其实是一个蛮掉线的故事。 但是《格列佛游记》的这一部分好像就没有前面小人国这么有名。也跟大家介绍。大家觉得如何呢？今天开到现在1个半小时，其实好像差不多。会，也不知道有没有没跟大家打招呼。谢谢大家过了还按爱心，应该说晚安了吗？我看一下啊，现在朗读我是倾向有写在月表上的，就是不是突发有标定的。而且这个月应该还有一次朗读台，格列佛游记应该朗读4次会读完。第4部的这个部分，所以如果大家有期待这个格列佛一个英国人跑到一个由马所主宰的文明社会，到底发生什么事的话呢？之后还可以再跟朗读台。对，如果关于作者或其他背景资讯的话，我应该是全部讲完再来讲好了，这样可能比较好。好啊，那感觉好像可以跟大家说晚安了耶，大家觉得如何？是要睡觉的时间了吗？这是一个其实还蛮反人类的故事啊，在一边等大家说晚安的同时啊，再讲一个，大家有看过那个吗？心灵判官 Psychopath 应该是2012年左右的一部动画吧。第一部是虚恩神所导演的 Psychopath 心灵判官。这个呢，他第一部的反派啊，就是 Psychopath 第一部的反派叫兽狗，对，兽狗圣护吧，对，神圣的圣，然后照护或者保护的护。对 ，Psychopath 的第一部反派呢叫做信狗，他读了很多书，包含什么圣经啊什么的。然后圣护在讲话的，他在讲就是人类思考是多么荒谬的这件事情的时候呢，曾经也有引用过《格列佛游记》里面的故事。不过他引的不是这一章啦，他引的是第3章，就是有那个拉普达跟日本的那一章，对，所以在 Psychopath 也有引用到的，所以就是最前面说的雅虎这个名称啊，还有拉普达天空之城拉普达这个名称，都是来自于《格列佛游记》这本书。然后Psychopath 如果有人有看过的话 ，Psychopath 第一部的反派也是有引用过《格列佛游记》这个故事的，一个很酷但还蛮掉线的故事，介绍给大家，我也很期待念之后的，那也请大家多多期待。好啦，来跟大家说晚安，谢谢丽说很喜欢，晚安，你也早点休息，祝好梦。谢谢萨卡莫多妹妹留的爱心，谢谢你来。你刚刚说挂台对不对？谢谢你浮出来跟我说晚安，希望你玩游戏玩得开心，然后也好睡。晚安。我想想，那我就切一滴，大家继续说晚安吗？妹妹录晚安，不辛苦，还好。我自己念也蛮开心的，也很想重温几年前读过蛮喜欢的故事。对，如果大家听得舒服，就不一定说倒背如流或很专心听，只要听得舒服，我也就很荣幸。晚安，谢谢你来。好，那我切一滴，但不关麦，我想说可能有人会浮上来晚安。对，切一滴咯，朗读台就不降落了。对，平常有时候是会忘记降落， 但朗读台是故意不讲，想要大家听完可以去睡觉。小饼干晚安，爸爸吧，谢谢你来，希望今天听友听得舒服，虽然这个故事蛮掉散的，谢谢你来，很高兴看到你。大家要说晚安吗？其实我觉得大家应该是挂台居多，不过挂台也还蛮荣幸的。朗读完之后情绪其实稳定很多欸，之前好像也有过这样。本来觉得有点心情不好，很郁闷，不过朗读完之后，整个就是很平静，感觉还不错。谢谢 Luke 过来，希望你今天可以有个好梦，然后对，希望可以安稳的早早睡觉，然后有个好梦。晚安，晚安，谢谢你来，今天也很高兴看到你。好啊，我想不然今天我就这样下播。如果有挂台到现在或是补档到现在，希望大家都能好梦，晚安好梦，谢谢你们过来，非常感谢大家，拜拜吧，拜拜拜拜，耶，那就下播啦，拜拜。